Ministerial Committee supervising the implementation of the political program to solve the crisis in Syria discusses a number of items and details of the preparatory stage. Al-Muallim states that the political program to solve the crisis in Syria depends on the aspirations and wishes of the Syrian people. The Algerian army concludes its operations against Al-Qaeda terrorists in Ain Minas, and Paris shrieks for help in Mali. Good afternoon, this is Dania Nizam with the News Bulletin. The Ministerial Committee assigned to carry out the political program to solve the crisis in Syria continued its meetings in the afternoon under the chairmanship of the Prime Minister. The committee discussed a number of items and details concerning the initial stage of the program, particularly those concerning humanitarian assistance and the utilization of the railways to transfer the assistance materials and to give compensations to the people harmed by terrorist attacks according to precise rules. The committee also discussed the situation of citizens who were forced to leave Syria towards neighboring countries. It called upon the Ministry of the Syrian Red Crescent to facilitate the return of these citizens and to supply them with travel documents that would allow them to enter the country. A decision was also made to provide temporary housing for the citizens whose homes were damaged by terrorist acts. The committee also discussed the memorandum of the Ministry of the Interior concerning the guarantees to be offered to all the opposition forces wishing to take part in the national dialogue. The committee also called upon the Ministry of National Reconciliation to prepare lists of missing people, detained citizens and those whose places are unknown. The committee also approved a number of relevant resolutions in this field. Foreign Minister Walid al-Muallim said in an interview with the Syrian television that the political program to solve the crisis depends on the aspirations of the Syrian people. Anybody who wants to serve the interests of the Syrian people should be committed to stop financing, arming and sheltering the terrorist groups.
In an interview with the Syrian TV channel, Foreign and Expatriates Minister Walid al-Muallim stressed that the political program stems from the Syrian people's aspirations and fulfills their demands, as it presents a solution through three phases, providing a fluid motion to the safe side of the country, leading to a renewable Syria, and blocks the road in the face of foreign initiatives that have started to emerge. Al-Muallim also stressed on spreading the language of dialogue and respecting the other's viewpoint, along with the role of the intellectuals which haven't manifested fully during the crisis, emphasizing on the importance of their role via the various media outlets in restoring the right Syrian ethical, social and historical values. Al-Muallim pointed out that the governmental committee under the chairmanship of the Prime Minister will make intensive communications with all Syrian components, noting that all those who reject foreign intervention and violence could communicate with the committee. The minister said that Qatar, Saudi Arabia and Turkey, led by the United States, are supporting, funding and arming terrorists in Syria. So countries who seek the interests of the Syrian people must be committed to stop funding, arming and harboring the terrorists, indicating that the United Nations, with the Syrian approval, is responsible for setting up a mechanism in order to make sure that everyone's commitment is setting the border. Al-Muallim asserted that the political program stems from the principles and objectives of the United Nations Charter, the international law and the Geneva Statement, as it is considered as the Syrian interpretation of the vague transitional period in the Geneva Statement, stressing that there will be no discussion with anyone about anything outside this program, noting that the Russian position adheres to the Geneva Statement. He added that the United Nations envoy to Syria, Al-Akhdar al-Ibrahimi, didn't come to Damascus with the project for a political solution. Rather, he adopted a position matching the ones of the US and the Arab Gulf, which conspire against Syria, causing him to deviate from the nature of his mission and move away from the principle of objectivity and mediation, stressing that it is not permitted for anyone to slight the position of the presidency, as no one has the decision of legitimacy in Syria except the Syrian people. He also considered that the U.S. placing of Jabhat al-Nusra on the list of terrorist organizations is an ironic step and insufficient, because if it really wanted to fight terrorism, it rather would do that through the Counter-Terrorism Committee in the Security Council by placing Jabhat al-Nusra on the list of terrorist organizations, and ordered the European countries to place it as well on the European lists of terrorism, indicating that Syria is asking from the United Nations to place the Jabhat al-Nusra on the list of terrorist organizations, as it brought fighters to Syria from 29 countries. We warned from pushing the Palestinians in the crisis through various means, because that violates their goal, which is the right to return. And we hold the international community responsible for the failure to implement the United Nations resolutions that relieve the suffering of the Palestinian people. The Syrian Arab Army didn't enter Al Yarmouk refugee camp because they didn't want to inflict any harm to any Palestinian, the minister said.
In Hama, a unit of our armed forces clashed with a group of armed terrorists and killed a number of them in the area of Al-San and Al-Udaib Valley in the countryside. Our forces confiscated a pickup vehicle carrying a machine gun that was used by the terrorists in their crimes. Units of our valiant armed forces inflicted heavy casualties among terrorists in Al-Mleha and Daraya in the Damascus countryside, killing the leader of the so-called the Military Council of the Brigade of Hamza ibn Abd al-Muttalib. An official source said that our army continued to chase the remaining terrorists in Daraya, killing many of them, including Abu Ali al-Janani, leader of a terrorist group calling itself the Grandsons of the Prophet. The dead terrorists also included Mustafa al-Mustafa, Mahdi Baraka and Muhammad Ashur. The source added that the terrorists in Al-Mleha also sustained heavy losses. A store of weapons, including heavy machine guns and bombs, was also destroyed. The engineering personnel also defused dozens of explosive devices, each weighing more than 30 kilograms, planted by the terrorists in the streets in order to be detonated by remote control. An international delegation led by John Jing, Director of Coordinating Humanitarian Affairs in Geneva, visited the governorate of Daraa and discussed with the governor, Mohammed Khalid Al-Hanous, the mechanisms of providing development, health and relief materials in the best and easiest ways to the displaced families and to give them their basic needs. The governor expressed readiness to cooperate with the UN in order to alleviate the suffering of the displaced people and to rehabilitate the infrastructure in order to serve citizens harmed by the attacks of terrorist groups. Mr. Jing expressed regret over the violence of terrorism targeting the Syrian people. Syrian students and citizens in France organized a stand of solidarity with their homeland in Paris against the world war that targets the unity and safety of our people. They commemorated the souls of our martyrs who died in the Aleppo University, Daraa and Idlib last week. They lit candles in memory of our military and civilian martyrs. They denounced the crimes of terrorists supported by Western and regional states. They also condemned France's double standards in dealing with the crisis in Syria. France gives great support to terrorists in Syria while it sends its soldiers and warplanes to Mali under the pretext of fighting terrorism. Syrian citizens, together with some Lebanese brothers, organized a stand of solidarity in Beirut yesterday evening in commemoration of the martyrs of Aleppo University and the Syrian Arab Army, who died in their confrontation of terrorist crimes. The demonstrators lit candles and raised the Syrian flags to express their solidarity with the families of the dead and wounded victims. They asserted that such terrorist crimes would never weaken the steadfastness of the Syrian people and their determination to defeat terrorism. Turkey is witnessing a large-scale popular rejection of the aggressive measures of Erdogan's government against Turkish lawyers who condemned his crimes against the Syrian people before Turkish jurisdiction. The lawyers asserted that they have become the targets of the crimes of Erdogan's government because they spoke the truth and exposed the crimes of murder and terrorism committed by the Turkish government and its agents against Syria and its economic, social and political structure.
Erdogan's security forces rushed to detain a number of these free, honest lawyers. This was denounced inside and outside Turkey. The Popular Front of Change and Liberation announced solidarity with the lawyers. It asserted that their detention was a desperate attempt to stop the rising current opposing Erdogan's internal and regional policies, particularly his measures against Syria. The National Democratic Bloc and the Party of National Youth also condemned these measures of Erdogan's government and called for the release of the lawyers. They also called upon the international community and legal organizations, particularly the International Bar Association, to shoulder their responsibilities in defense of these lawyers. The Syrian Bar Association supported this urgent call. The detained lawyers included the chairman of the Contemporary Bar Association, who held a series of meetings with Syrian groups and activities. The chairman of the Contemporary Bar Association in Turkey, Seljuk Kosashli, asserted that the association would work together with all the labor unions in Turkey to form a large moving force on the ground to expose and condemn the crimes of Erdogan's government against the Syrian people and their private and public properties.
Algerian Interior Ministry said that the military operation to release the hostages held by terrorists in the gas production facility of Ain Aminas resulted in the release of 792 workers and the killing of 32 terrorists from 6 nationalities, while 23 hostages were also killed. For his part, Minister of Communication Mohammed Al Saeed confirmed the rising death toll during the operation to release the hostages, adding that the final death toll will be announced in the next few hours. Algerian officials said that during the operation, a large quantity of weapons, foreign military uniforms and an amount of ammunition and explosives were also seized. Last Wednesday, Al-Qaeda-linked terrorist group had claimed responsibility for the attack on the oil facility in which many hostages were held. Moroccan authorities announced that they dismantled a new terrorist network that had been recruiting members of what they called Al-Qaeda in the country. This is the 5th network that had been dismantled since last fall. Moroccan Interior Ministry confirmed that the national team of the Judicial Police was able to dismantle a network that was active in attracting and recruiting young Moroccans with the aim of sending them to Al-Jihad as part of the terrorist groups loyal to Al-Qaeda. The authorities said that 40 Moroccan young men, including former detainees in Guantanamo, were sent into factions loyal to Al-Qaeda. The authorities expressed concern over the increasing numbers of those terrorist networks in the country. In the Black and Mediterranean Seas and under the supervision of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces, the Russian Navy has started the largest military drills. As Russia Today website on Saturday quoted Information Office of the Russian Defense Ministry saying in a statement that warships of the Black Sea, Baltic and North Fleets are participating in what it described as the biggest combat exercises for decades. Earlier, a military diplomatic source said that the large landing Azov ship is heading for Tartus after it was supplied with the required war equipment, loading infantry units of the Russian Navy, as the ship has reached the agency to join other Russian warships there. And now it's over to Vani Konjan with our economic news. For more information, you can visit our website on syriaonline.sy. God bless you and God bless our beloved country.